tips for talking to a camera. First, I'm not talking to a camera. I am talking to that little piece of paper on the back side of my camera that has a big smiley face and a baseball cap. I'm not talking to a camera, I'm talking to you. And so I need to really spend time thinking about who's my audience, why are they watching, why do they matter, and who are they? So basically, the lens of my camera, that's the eyes of my audience. And I need to spend time making eye contact with my audience, but not staring at them constantly, because that gets old quick. The other thing I need to think about is lighting. Whether or not it's too dark, too bright, I need to consider how the audience is going to see the video and how that lighting or shadow is going to influence the way in which they see me. Another thing you might want to think about is how to frame. Now, you can frame your shot so that you're about 3/4, or you can frame your shot so you're super close, but I don't know about you. This just makes me want to back away quickly. Things you need to think about is sitting or standing. Now, before I made this video, I tried a stool, I tried a kitchen chair, I tried a soft, cozy chair, and what I found, at least for me, was in the super soft chair, I sank down and kind of arched a little bit, and it was hard for me to get air support. In the stool that I had, I found out, at least for mine, it was super creaky, and I couldn't stop moving. And so I creaked too much. In the kitchen chair that I tried, the bar stool sort of upright kitchen chair, I found like it worked better because I could sit up straight and it wasn't so creaky. But I found, at least for me, the types of gestures I give when I sit are different than those when I stand. So for me, standing works. You can sit or you can stand, but you need to think about how your decision to do either one impacts how you talk to the audience.
And our study of time goes back long before we even have records. The ancient Egyptians used obelisks as sundials to tell what time it was during the day. They also had water clocks that flowed at a steady rate to keep time, and obviously hourglasses. It was the Babylonians that first divided the day into hours made up of 60 minutes each, which were divided up by 60 seconds each, and they did this all the way back in 1800 BCE. It was the great Dutch astronomer and physicist Christian Huygens who first invented the pendulum clock in 1656. This was actually the most accurate way of keeping time for the next 300 years.
At number 10, it's how differently Irish and American people use cutlery. Let me show you. If I'm eating a meal, I will cut up my food, and then I'll continue to hold my knife, and I'll put the food in my mouth. And that's just how I'll spend the whole meal, as an Irish person. Nom nom nom, cut the uppy food. Now, let me try and remember how American people do it. They go like this, and they cut up the food, and then they put down the knife, and then they transfer the fork over, and then they pick up the food like this.
Hey everybody, this is Adam Neely, and these are 3 tips for YouTube for musicians. The first tip is think very carefully about your titles. I'm not going to say that you should clickbait your titles, but one of the things that journalists do is they always think of the lead. They always think of the headline. Think about how journalists write entirely really interesting stories that have a lot to do with the world around them, but they simplify the entire story to one nugget that can be understood very quickly. So even the name of this video, 3 Tips for YouTube Musicians, is a good example of this sort of idea. There's always has to be a hook in the title.
The next thing you need to think about is distraction, noise. Well, the first time I set this up, not kidding, I am in the corner of my sitting room, which is attached to my bedroom, and my husband was in the other room, wasn't paying attention. All of a sudden, he comes out of the shower and says, "Oh, are you recording?" Whatever it is, make sure that your kids know, your roommate knows, your parents know, and you've calmed the dog down so it's not making noise.
In conclusion, it's important that you test your camera, run a sound check, do a lighting check. I have recorded video before where I spend a lot of time and effort to make what I thought was a perfect video, only to find out later that the microphone wasn't working. You do not want to put yourself in that situation. Test your camera, make sure everything works. To that end, while testing it, make sure that you determine your shot. What I mean by shot is, what will you see inside the camera? What will the audience see. So are you going to show from your shoulders up? Are you going to show from your chest up? Are you going to show from your waist up? Decide what looks the best. Decide what works the best for the type of speech that you're doing. Also consider the angle of the camera. You don't want to look down on the audience, and you don't want the audience looking up your nose. And the audience, of course, is the camera lens. So make sure that you position your video camera to be eye level with your eyes. The way that I do that, I mentioned already, is I draw a little cartoon on my camera and then I work to make sure that that is indeed eye level. Look at your background and see what's in the shots. Are there any distracting posters? Are there messes that you don't want people to see? Are there sounds in the background of your neighbor vacuuming or the birds chirping outside? As much as you can, try to figure out what works, what doesn't, and what's going to help the audience to pay attention to what you have to say. Transitioning, of course, to that idea of removing distractions. Tell your roommates you're recording. Let your children know not to walk in on you. Tell your parents to be quiet. Put a sign outside the door for a little while. Have a friend take a noisy pet for a walk. Be aware of all of the things that can distract. And of course, I've mentioned already, backgrounds can be distracting. If you have a book on your desk, I may be wanting to read the title and try to figure out what you like rather than listening to your speech. So consider some of those things. And with all things, the most important is to consider your audience. Who are they? Why are they listening to you? What do they need from you? How can you position yourself and your speech in such a way to help them in some way? The way that you connect with your audience, of course, is through customizing your content, but also through eye contact. That ever important making eye contact. And in this case, making eye contact means looking at your camera directly. One of the ways that I accomplish that is, of course, my cartoon that you see there, but also I tape my note cards on the wall behind my camera. That way I never have to look down to get my notes, but instead I can just look at the back wall and look at my notes without the audience even knowing that I've done it. But most important, be yourself. A good speech is always about making connections. It's not about being perfect.
One of the things you should do when you record is minimize distractions, like my husband in the background talking about Kid Rock. Even though I put the sign on the door, you can hear clearly he has great things to say.